Microphone check 1 2. What is this? The 5-foot assassin with the roughneck business. Microphone check 1 2. What is this? Microphone check. Microphone is on, so of course communication. Well, it's the MI crooked letter. Ain't no one better. And when I'm on the microphone, you best to grab your sweater because I'm cooler than a polar bear's toenails. Oh, hell, been cornered like a curve. Hey, y'all, that's weird. That is not what was supposed to happen. Actually, this is what was supposed to happen. Okay, that's a little bit better. That's what was supposed to happen. And I see that my camera's lagging a little bit, but we're not going to worry ourselves about that now, are we? All right, microphone is on. So, of course, communications. Go ahead and test things out and make sure everything is doing what it's supposed to do. Check, 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 check. I hope y'all can hear me. I see I've got a few of you that are here with us tonight. That is always a pleasure. Hello to Judy Lee. Hello to Erica Yolita. What's happening, Kitty Foxy? Good to see you. I see Benyelle made it, and she's on time. And she feels like she should get a medal or something. You get a shout out. Hey, Benyelle. Hey, on time, Benyelle. We're very happy to see you. Mimi Brown is here asking what it do. What doesn't it do? It do all the things, don't it? I see K&M here. Good to see. Good to see. Salt and Honey. I believe that's Alicia. Good to see you here. Kamisha Umstead is in the building, and that's wonderful. It's just good to see everybody. Everybody. So much to discuss today. So, first of all, I need to woosah for a minute, right? Because I was rushing because I had to, when that didn't work, I had to run and get something together. So many things that I want to share with you all, but first, let me calm down. I know that a lot of you all, let me make sure you can hear me. I know a lot of you all like to relax with a nice bottle of wine. So do I. And tonight I'm going to be enjoying this. This is chilled because I like some kinds of wines chilled. Now you might be looking at the bottle and you're like, Julian, that's a red, and we don't chill reds. And you're right. Sure, we don't chill reds unless it's not exactly a red. It's a beach wine. It's a fruit sort of wine. I like fruity wines. Here's why, because typically I believe the vernacular is drink brown when it comes to imbibing. I am one of the few ways wherein I would call myself a Kentucky boy. There we go. Is in that I am a fan of bourbon almost exclusively. Love the bourbon. And so when I'm chilling, when I want something that is, not as serious a drink, that's when I want wine. And for wine to be relaxing for me, oh, that was a nice sound. I like that. For wine to be relaxing to me, it needs to have a nice little sweetness. I enjoy, I enjoy a dry red. I really do. My favorites are Riojas, Spanish Riojas, Tempranillo grapes, but I don't have a whole lot of energy for. It's got notes of cardamom with a back note of I'm getting asparagus, and this tastes as though it were grown in the soil. I ain't got time for all that when I want to chill wine. Okay, I just want something nice, and so what I'm having right now. Okay, hold on. All right, what I just had. Mm, what I just had was English Brown Winery's Blackberry Delight. And when I tell you that delight was exactly the right word, delight was exactly the right word. Ooh, that was good. Like, here's the thing. Like, English Brown Winery, let me tell you. First of all, English Brown Winery is a friend of the show. It is founded and run by Siobhan Brown Robinson. She is the Brown in English Brown. And she is a Black woman. And I always support Black businesses. And I make a point to support Black women owned businesses. And so, English Brown Winery, as a friend of the show, has afforded us. Let me see, where can I find it? Oh, did I not put it? Well, hold up. Let me just go ahead and fix that right now. You too can have a bottle of Blackberry Delight or some of the other wonderful flavors available at English Brown Winery if you go to EnglishBrownWinery.com. And if you use the code STWJ, you will save 10% on whatever your purchase is. And I know that because it's right there at the bottom of the screen. So if you go to EnglishBrownWinery.com, you can get yourself a delightful bottle of, hold on, let me make you see it. I want you to see it. The light and the glare don't want to cooperate. You can't see it. I guess you'll have to get your own bottle so that you can see it. Or you could go to EnglishBrownWinery.com and see the selections. Now, earlier this week, I had a bottle of Strawberry Sensation. I personally loved Strawberry Sensation. It was a white based wine. I loved it, but I wasn't going to drink Strawberry Sensation on the air in front of y'all because, I mean, I got my limits. At least this is sort of a darker purple. My room's already pink. What y'all want? Okay. So I wasn't going to do that to myself. But Strawberry Sensation was absolutely delightful. Now, if y'all are like vegetabiliarians and whatnot, and you don't really eat a lot of meat, let me tell you, like this pairs was so beautifully with like a pasta salad. Like it's a very light sort of thing. So for those of you who live in the Florida area, if you're in sort of Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood, Florida, in that area, you can swing by English Brown Winery and have a tasting. If you go, you might be able to get a bottle of their key lime, or maybe you're like a Merlot, Cabernet. Like they got all them serious wines too. But right now, this is chill. So I just want to have a chill wine. Hold up a second. I'm really not trying to. This is just really good, and I want some more. Okay. All right. I'm gonna behave now. I'm gonna get it together. Kitty Foxy said, pour more. All right. So Siobhan Brown Robinson is actually in the space right now. So if you all want to support, and I really, really strongly encourage you to do, go to EnglishBrownWinery.com, use the code STWJ, save 10% on that. Matter of fact, let me show you a little something. Let me show you a little something. If y'all got a minute, y'all got a minute. Give me a minute of your time. If we can get it back. There we go. All right. So that's English Brown Winery. I really do hope that you all check it out. And thank you, Siobhan. Now, I want to be clear. They didn't pay for this promo. This is just something that I wanted to do. And this bottle that I got was not a gift. I paid for it. I bought it because when I say support, I mean support. I don't mean ask for stuff for free and call it support. I mean legit support. So I hope that it means that to you and that you all do some supporting of English Brown Winery. All right. Now I got my bottle. I'm good. I'm not gonna pour anymore because this is not an ASMR show. But let's talk about what we're gonna do tonight. So tonight is this happens to be the birthday of two of the artists that we have featured on the show before. It's the birthday of ZZ Packer, who we have read a few stories of, and is the birthday of Walter Mosley. Now, we've just picked up his most recent book, so we've been reading some Walter Mosley already. But this time around, we're going to read two more really short, or I'm not going to say they're both really short, but we're going to read a really short piece from Walter Mosley and a short piece from ZZ Packer. Now, I'm giving you all this heads up because I know that ZZ Packer and Walter Mosley have not been everybody's cup of tea. Reasons being that they have featured, and a couple of the stories that we've read, they have centered uh, white people. And it was kind of like, what? Where is this coming from? Walter Mosley, in particular, has a tendency to center white women, and they come off as these sort of white savior figures. We read Almost Alice, and even though Alice, the woman that the protagonist was in love with, was a black woman, the hero or heroine of the story ended up being a white woman who reminded him of Alice. We read a piece from ZZ Packer called, I believe it was Peta's Dream, about a young girl who worked at a pita place and um, for reasons that I don't understand, was collecting crickets, and she centered a white boyfriend in that story. And I get that that's troublesome and problematic. We've talked about a lot of that. I still, because it's their birthday, I'm going to honor their contributions to the literary world with a couple of stories because part of this show is critique and discovery and understanding. And even when people are putting stuff in their work that we don't necessarily dig for whatever our personal political or personal policies or political leanings might be, I think when we're talking about Black writers and Black authors, I've got a lot more room for grace. I really do. So, with the understanding that we got our eyes open, we looking to see who ends up getting centered. I'm going to start with ZZ Packer, ladies first. And this has not been pre-read. I did in my skimming see my name, and that made me want to read it. Um, and also, this is a churchy story. And I kind of like churchy stories because I'm hoping I get the opportunity to do like a pastor voice. All right. Y'all with me? So let's go ahead and we're going to begin with that. Let me go ahead and click that banner up. Bam. Every Tongue Shall Confess by ZZ Packer. As Pastor Everett made the announcements that began the service, Clarice Mitchell stood with her choir members, knowing that once again she had to persevere. Put on the strong armor of God, the blessed breastplate of righteousness, but she was having her monthly womanly troubles, and all she wanted to do was curse the Brothers Church Council of Greater Christ Emmanuel Pentecostal Church of the Fire Baptized, who decided that the sisters had to wear white every missionary Sunday, which was, of course, the day of the month when her womanly troubles were always at their absolute worst. And to think that the brothers and to think that the Brothers Church Council of Greater Christ Emmanuel Pentecostal Church of the Fire Baptized had been in the first place. She'd looked for guidance and companionship nearly 10 years ago when her Aunt Alma had fallen ill. And why not? They were God-fearing, church-going men, men like Deacon Julian Jeffers, now sitting in the first row of pews closest to the altar, right under the leafy top of the corn plant she'd brought in to make the sanctuary more homey. 2 months ago, she'd been reading the book of Micah and posed the idea of a book of Micah discussion group to the Deacon Jeffers, and he'd said, "Oh, Sister Clarice, we should make you a deacon," which of course they didn't. Deacons, like pastors, were men. Not that she was complaining, but it still rankled that Jeffers had said he'd get back to her about the Micah discussion group, and he never had. Clarice's cross eyes drove to the back of the church where Sister Drusilla and Sister Maxwell sat, resplendent in their identical wide-brimmed purple-flowered hats, their unsaved guests sitting next to them. The guests wore frightened smiles, and Clarice tried to shoot them reassuring looks. The gold-lettered banner behind them read, "We are more than conquerors in Christ our Lord," and she tried to use this as a focal point. But her cross eyes couldn't help it. They settled at last on Deacon Macready, making his way down the aisle for the second time. Oh, how she hated him. She would never forget, never, 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 the day he came to the hospital where she worked. She was still wearing her white nurse's uniform, and he'd said he was a little concerned about her spiritual well-being. Liar! Then drove her to where she lived with her Aunt Alma, whose room resounded with her perpetual snores and hacking and wheezing, as if Clarice didn't have enough of this at the hospital. All while Alma slept, Clarice poured Deacon Macready some fruit punch, which he drank between forkfuls of chicken plus half their pork roast. No sooner than he'd wiped his hands on the napkin, didn't bother using a fork, he stood and walked behind her, covering her cross eyes as though she were a child, as though he were about to give her a gift, a Bible with her very own name engraved on it, perhaps. But he didn't give her anything. He just covered her wandering eyes and said, "Sing on Christ the solid rock I stand. Make sure to do the waterfall." And she was happy to do it, happy to please Deacon Macready. So she began singing in her best, cleanest voice until she felt his hand slide up the starchy white pantyhose of her nurse's uniform and up toward the control top of her pantyhose. Before she could stop him, one finger was wiggling around inside, and by then it was too late to tell him she was having her monthly womanly troubles. He drew back in disgust, no, hatred, then rinsed his hand in the kitchen sink and left without saying a word. Not thanks for the chicken or the pork roast or her singing. Not a single word of apology for anything. But she could have forgiven him, if sisters could even forgive deacons. For she could have understood that an unmarried man might have needs, but what really bothered her now was how he ignored her. How a few weeks later she and Aunt Alma had been waiting for the bus after Wednesday night prayer meeting, and he drove past. That's right. No offer of a ride, no slowing down, no nothing. Aunt Alma was nearly blind and couldn't even see it was him, but Clarice recognized his car at once. Yes, she wanted to curse the Brothers Church Council of the Greater Christ Emmanuel Pentecostal Church of the Fire Baptized. But sisters and brothers could not curse, could not even swear or take an oath. For neither shalt thou swear by thy head, because thou canst make one hair white or black. So no oath, no swearing, and of course no betting, an extension of swearing, which is why she told the other nurses at University Hospital that she would not join their betting pool to predict who would get married first, Patty or Edwina. She told them about the black and white hairs, and all Nurse Holloway did was clomp her pumps as if she was too good for the standard orthopedically correct shoes down the green tiles of the hall and shout behind her back, "Somebody sure needs to get laid." Oh, how the other RNs tittered in their gossipy way. Now, everyone applauded when Pastor Everett announced that Sister Nina would be getting married to Harold, one of the brothers from Broadway Tongues of Spirit Church. Then Pastor Everett said, "Sister Nina will be holding a council so we can get husbands for the rest of you hard-working sisters." Like Sister Clarice is what he meant. The congregation laughed at the joke, ha, ha, and perhaps the joke was on her. If she'd been married, Deacon Macready wouldn't have dared do what he did. If she'd been married, perhaps also working fewer shifts at the hospital, perhaps she would have never met that patient, that man who'd almost gotten her fired. And at exactly that moment, it hit her, right below the gut, a sharp pain. And she imagined her uterus, that Texas-shaped organ, the Rio Grande of her monthly womanly troubles, flushing out to the Gulf. Pastor Everett had finished the announcements. Now it was time for testimony service. She tried to distract herself by thinking of suitable testimonies. Usually, she testified about work. Last week, she testified about the poor man with the plate. Last week, she testified about the poor man with a platelet count of 7, meaning he was a goner, and how Nurse Holloway had told him, "We're bringing you more platelets," and how he'd said, "That's all right. God sent me more." No one at the nurse's station, to say nothing of the atheist doctors, believed him. But when Nurse Holloway checked, sure enough, glory be to God, he had a count of 16. Clarice told the congregation how she knelt on the cold tile floor of University Hospital's corridor right then and there, arms stretched out to glory. And what could the other nurses say to that? Nothing. That's what. She remembered her testimony from a month ago, how she'd been working the hotline and a mother had called to say that her son had eaten ants. And Sister Clarice had assured the woman that ants were God's creatures, and though disturbing, they wouldn't harm the boy. But the Lord told Clarice to stay on the line with the mother, not to rush the way the other nurses often did. So Clarice stayed on the line. And glory be to God that she did. Once the mother had calmed down, she said, "Thank goodness the insecticide I gave Kevin must have worked." Sister Clarice had stayed after her shift to make sure the woman brought her boy into the emergency. Afterwards, she told the woman to hold hands with Kevin and give God the praise he deserved. But she had told those stories already. As she fidgeted in her choir mistress's chair, she tried to think of new ones. The congregation wouldn't care about how she had to stay on top of codes or how she had to triple check patients' charts. The only patients who stuck in her mind were Miss Geneva Balsma, whose toe was rotten off, and Mr. Toomey, who had prostate cancer, and of course Mr. Cleophas Sanders, the cause of all her current problems. Cleophas was an amputee who liked to turn the volume of his television up so high that his channel surfing sounded as if someone was being electrocuted repeatedly. At the nurse's station, she'd overheard that Cleophas Sanders was once a musician who, in his heyday, went by the nickname Delta Sweetmeat. But he'd gone in and out of the music business, sometimes taking construction jobs. A crane had fallen on his leg and he'd been amputated from below the knee. No, none of the cases was edifying in God's sight. Her run-in with Cleophas had been downright unedifying. When Mr. Sanders had been moved into Mr. Toomey's room last Monday, she told them both, "I hope everyone has a blessed day." She made sure to say this only after she was safely inside with the door closed behind her. She had to make sure she didn't mention God until the door was closed behind her, because Nurse Holloway was always clumping about trying to say this was a university hospital as well as a research hospital, one at the very forefront of medicine, and didn't registered Nurse Clarice Mitchell recognize and respect that not everyone shared her beliefs? That the hospital catered not only to Christians, but to people of the Jewish faith, to Muslims, Hindus, and agnostics, atheists even? This Clarice knew all too well, which is why it was all the more important for her to spread the gospel. So she shut the door and said to Mr. Toomey louder this time, "I hope everyone has a blessed day." Mr. Toomey grunted. Heavy and completely white, he reminded Sister Clarice of a walrus. Everything about him drooped, his eyes like twin frowns, his nose, perhaps even his mouth, though it was hard to make out because his frowning blonde mustache. Well, glory be to God, she expected something like a grunt from him. She couldn't say she was surprised. Junkies who detox scream and writhe before turning clean. The man with the hangover does not like to wake to the sun. So it was with sinners exposed to the harsh, cursing light of the Lord. "Hey, sanctified lady," Cleophas Sanders called from across the room. "He got cancer. Let the man alone." "I know what he has," Sister Clarice said. "I'm his nurse." This wasn't how she wanted the patient-RN relationship to begin, but Cleophas had gotten the better of her. Yes, that was the problem, wasn't it? He'd gotten the better of her. This was how Satan worked, throwing you off a little at a time. She would have to persevere, put on the strong armor of God. She tried again. "My name is Sister Clarice Mitchell, your assigned registered nurse. I can't exactly say that I'm pleased to meet you because that would be a lie, and lying lips are an abomination to the Lord. I will say that I'm pleased to do my duty and help you recover." "Me, oh my," Cleophas Sanders said, and he laughed big and long, the kind of laughter that could go on and on, rising and rising, restarting itself if need be, like yeast. He slapped the knee of his amputated leg, the knee that would probably come off if his infection didn't stop eating away at it. But Cleophas Sanders didn't care. He just slapped that infected knee, hooting all the while in an ornery backwoods kind of way that made Clarice want to hit him. But of course, she would never do that. She busied herself by changing Mr. Toomey's catheter and then remaking his bed, rolling the walrus of him this way and that with a little help on his part. As soon as she was done with Mr. Toomey, He turned on the Knicks game. The whole time she changed Mr. Toomey's catheter, however, Cleophas had watched her, laughing under his breath, then outright, a waxing and waning of hilarity as if her every gesture were laughably prim and proper. "Look, Mr. Cleophas Sanders," she said, glad for the chance to bite on the ridiculous name, "I am a professional. You may laugh at what I do, but in doing so, you laugh at the Almighty who has given me the breath to do it." She steeled herself for a vulgar reply. But no, Mr. Toomey did the talking. "I tell you what," Mr. Toomey said, pointing his remote at Sister Clarice, "I'm going to sue this hospital for lack of peace and quiet. All your almighty this and old glory that is keeping me from watching the game." So Sister Clarice murmured her apologies to Mr. Toomey, the whole while Cleophas Sanders put on an act of restraining his amusement, body and bed quaking in seizure-like fits. Now sunlight filtered through the yellow-tinted windows of Greater Christ Emmanuel Pentecostal Church of the Fire Baptized, lighting Brother Hopkins, the organist, with a halo-like glow. The rest of the congregation had given their testimonies, and now it was time for the choir members to testify, starting with Clarice. Was there any way she could possibly turn her incident with Cleophas Sanders into an edifying testimony experience? Just then another hit, and she felt a cramping so hard she thought she might double over. It was her turn. Cleophas's laughter and her cramping womb seemed one and the same. He'd inhabited her body like a demon, preventing her from thinking up a proper testimony. As she rose unsteadily to her feet, all she managed to say was, "Pray for me." It was almost time for Pastor Everett to preach his sermon. To introduce it, Sister Clarice had the choir sing, "Every knee shall bow, every tongue shall confess." It was an old-fashioned hymn, unlike the hopped-up gospel songs churches were given to nowadays. And she liked the slow unfolding of its message, how without people uttering a word, all their hearts would be made plain to the Lord, that he would know you not by what you said or did, but by what you'd hoped and intended. The teens, however, mumbled over their verses, and older choir members sang without vigor. The hymn ended up sounding like the national anthem at a school assembly, a stout-hearted song rendered in monotone. Thank you, Sister Clarice," Pastor Everett said, looking back at her, "for that wonderful tune." Tune? She knew that Pastor Everett thought she was not the kind of person a choir mistress should be. She was quiet, nervous, skinny in all the wrong places, and completely cross-eyed. She knew that he thought of her as something worse than a spinster, but she wasn't yet old. Pastor Everett hunched close to the microphone as though about to begin a forlorn love song. From the corners of her vision, she saw him smile, only for a second, but with every single tooth in his mouth. He was yam-colored and giving to wearing epaulets on the shoulders of his robes and gold braiding all down the front. Sister Clarice felt no attraction to him, but she seemed to be the only one who didn't. Even the sisters going on 80 were charmed by Pastor Everett, who, though not entirely handsome, had handsome moments. "Sister Clarice," he said, turning to where she stood with the choir. "Sister Clarice, I know y'all just sang for us, but I need some more help. Satan got these brothers and sisters putting Lord on hold." Sister Clarice knew that everyone expected her and her choir to begin singing again, but she had been alerted to what he was up to. He had called her yesterday. He had thought nothing of asking her to unplug her telephone, her only telephone, her private line, to bring it to church so that he could use it in some sermon about call waiting. Hadn't even asked her how she was doing, hadn't bothered to pray over her Aunt Alma's sickness. Nevertheless, she'd said, "Why, certainly, Pastor Everett, anything I can do to help." Now, Sister Clarice produced her princess telephone from under her seat and handed it to the pastor. Pastor Everett held the telephone aloft, shaking it as if to get rid of demons. "How many of y'all, brothers and sisters, got telephones?" the pastor asked. One by one, the members of the congregation timidly raised their hands. "All right," Pastor Everett said, as though this grieved him. "Almost all of y'all." He flipped through his huge pulpit Bible. "How many of y'all, brothers and sisters, got call waiting?" He turned the pages quickly, then stopped, as though he didn't need to search the scripture after all. "Let me tell you," the pastor said, nearly kissing the microphone. There is someone who won't accept your call waiting. There is someone who won't wait when you put him on hold. Sister Nancy Popwell and Sister Drusella Davies now had their eyes closed in concentration, their hands waving slowly in the air in front of them as though they were trying to make their way through a dark room. The last phone call Sister Clarice had made was on Wednesday to Mr. Toomey. She knew both he and Cleophas were likely to reject the Lord, but she had a policy of sorts, which was to call patients who'd been in her care for at least a week. She considered it her Christian duty to call, even on her day off, to let them know that Jesus cared and that she cared. The other RNs resorted to callous catchphrases that they bandied about the nurses' station. Just because I care for them doesn't mean I have to care about them. Or, I'm a nurse, not a nursery. Not Clarice. Perhaps she'd been curt with Cleophas Sanders, but she had also been in defense of God. Perhaps Mr. Toomey had been curt with her, but he was going into the OR soon, and grouchiness was to be expected. Nurse Patty had been switchboard operator that night, and Clarice had to endure her sighs before the girl finally connected her to Mr. Toomey. Praise the Lord, Mr. Toomey. Who's this? This is your nurse, Sister Clarice, and I'm calling to say that Jesus will be with you through your surgery. Who? Jesus, she said. She thought she heard the phone disconnect. Then a voice, of course, Cleophas Sanders. Why ain't you call me? Cleophas said. Sister Clarice tried to explain her policy, the thing about the week. So you care about some white dude more than you care about good old Cleophas? It's not that, Mr. Sanders. God cares for white and black alike. Acts 10:34 says, God is no respecter of persons, black or white, red or purple or green. He doesn't care as long as you accept his salvation and live right. When he was silent on the other end, she said, It's only that I've known you for 2 days. I'll see you tomorrow. She tried to hang up, but he said, Let me play something for you. Something interesting, since all you probably listen to is monks chanting and such. Before she could respond, there was a noise on the other end that sounded like juke music. Then he came back on the phone and said, Like that, don't you? I had the phone away from my ear. I thought you said lion is the abominable. Do you like or do you don't? When she said nothing, he said, Truth now. She answered yes. She didn't want to answer yes, but she also didn't want to lie. And what was one to do in that circumstance? If God looked into your heart right then, what would he think? Or would he have to approve because he made your heart that way? Or were you obliged to train it against its wishes? She didn't know what to think, but on the other end, Cleophas said, What you just heard there was the blues. What you just heard there was me. Let me tell you, Pastor Everett shouted, his voice hitting its highest octave. Jesus did not tell his daddy, oh, I'm sorry, Pops, but my girlfriend is on the other line. Jesus never told the omnipotent one, can you wait a sec? I think I got a call from the electric company. Jesus never told Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, I'm sorry, but I got to put you on hold. I'm sorry, Brother Luke, but I got some mac and cheese in the oven. I'm sorry, but I got to eat this fried chicken. And at that, Pastor Everett paused, grinning in anticipation of his own punchline. Because his finger licking good. Drops of sweat plunked onto his microphone. Sister Clarice watched as the congregation cheered, the women flagging their Bibles in the air as though the Bibles were as light and yielding as handkerchiefs, their bosoms jouncing as they were harboring sacks of potatoes in their blouses. They shook tambourines, scores of them all going at once, the sound of something sizzling and frying. That was it? That was the message? Of course, she'd only heard part of it, but still. Of course, she believed that one's daily life shouldn't outstrip one's spiritual one, but there seemed to be no place for true belief at Greater Christ Emmanuel Pentecostal Church of the Fire Baptized. Everyone wanted flash and props. No one wanted the word itself, naked in its fiery glory. Most of the brothers and sisters were up on their feet. Tell it, yelled some, while others called out, Go head on. The organist pounded out the chords to what could have been the theme song of a TV game show. She looked to see what Sister Drusella's and Sister Maxwell's unsaved guests were doing. Drusella's unsaved guest was her son, which made him easy to bring into the fold. He was living in her shed and had no car. He was busy turning over one of the cardboard fans donated by the Hamblin and Sons funeral parlor, reading the words intently, then flipping it over again to stare at the picture of the gleaming casket and grieving family. Sister Donna Maxwell's guest was an ex-con she'd written to and tried to save while he was in prison. The ex-con seemed to watch the scene with approval, but one could never really know what was going on in the criminal mind. For all Sister Clarice knew, he could be counting all the pockets he planned to pick. And they called themselves missionaries, family members and ex-cons who were easy to convince of God's will. As soon as Drusella's son took note of the pretty young sisters his age, he'd be back. And everyone knew you could convert an ex-con with a few well-timed pecan pies. Wednesday was her only day off besides Sunday, and though a phone call or two was her policy on days off, she very seldom visited the hospital. And yet last Wednesday she had to. The more she considered Cleophas's situation, his loss of limb, his devil's music, his unsettling laughter, the more she grew convinced that he was her missionary challenge, that he was especially in need of saving. Minutes after she talked with him on the phone, she took the number 42 bus and transferred to the Crosstown H, then walked the rest of the way to the hospital. Edwina had taken over for Patty as nurse's station attendant and said, "We have an ETOH in. Where's your uniform?" "It's not my shift," she called behind her as she rushed past Edwina and into room 204. She opened the door to find Cleophas sitting on the bed, still plucking chords on his unplugged electric guitar that she'd heard him playing over the phone half an hour earlier. Mr. Toomey's bed was empty. One of the nurses must have already taken him to OR, so Cleophas had the room to himself. The right leg of Cleophas' hospital pants hung down limp and empty, and it was the first time she'd seen his guitar, curvy and shiny as a sports car. He did not acknowledge her when she entered. He was still picking away at his guitar, singing a song about a man whose woman had left him so high and dry she'd taken the car, the dog, the furniture, even the wallpaper. Only when he'd strummed the final chords did Only when he'd strummed the final chords did Cleophas look up, as if noticing her for the first time. "Sister Clarice." He said it as if he were introducing a showgirl. "It's your soul," Clarice said. "God wants me to help save your soul." The urgency of God's message struck her so hard, she felt the wind knocked out of her. She sat on the bed next to him. "Really?" he said, cocking his head a little. "Really and truly," Clarice said. "I know I said I liked your music, but I said it because God gave you a gift for you to use for him." "Mm-hmm," Cleophas said. "How about this, little lady? How about if God lets me keep this knee? I'll come to church with you. We can go out and get some dinner afterwards, like a proper couple." She tried not to be flattered. "The Lord does not make deals, Mr. Sanders. But I'm sure the Lord would love to see you in church regardless of what happens to your knee." "Well, since you seem to be his receptionist, how about you ask the Lord if he can give you the day off? I can take you out on the town. See, if I go to church, I know the Lord won't show, but I'm positive you will." "Believe you me, Mr. Sanders, the Lord is at every service. Where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there am I in the midst of them." She sighed, trying to remember what she came to say. "He is the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh to the Father," Cleophas said, "but by me." She looked at him. "You know your Bible." "No, you were speaking and I just heard it." He absently strummed his guitar. "You were talking, saying that verse, and the rest of it came to me. Not even a voice, more like, kind of like music." She stared. Her hands clapped his, preventing him from playing further. For a moment, she was breathless. He looked at her, suddenly seeming to comprehend what he'd just said, that the Lord had actually spoken to him. For a minute they sat there, both overjoyed at what the Lord had done, but then he had to go and ruin it. He burst out laughing, his biggest, most sinful laugh yet. "Oh," he cried, doubled over. Then he flopped backward onto his hospital bed. Then he closed his eyes, laughing without a sound. She stood up, chest heaving, wondering why she even bothered with him. Cla- Clarice, he said, trying to clear his voice of any leftover laughter. Don't go. He looked at her with pleading eyes, then patted the space beside him on the bed. She looked around the room for some cue. Whenever she needed an answer, she relied on some sign from the Lord, a fresh beam of sunlight through the window, the hands of a clock folded in prayer, or the flush of a commode. These were signs that whatever she was thinking of doing was right. If there was a storm cloud or something in her path, that was a bad sign. But nothing in the room gave her any indication whether she should stay and witness to Mr. Sanders or go. What, Mr. Sanders, do you want from me? It's my day off. I decided to come by and offer you an invitation to my church because God has given you a gift, a musical gift. She dug into her purse, then pulled out a pocket-sized Bible. But I'll leave you with this. If you need to find us, our church, the name and the number is printed inside. He took the Bible with a little smile, turning it over, then flipped through it, as if some money might be tucked away inside. Seriously, though, let me ask you a question that's going to seem dumb, childish. Now, I want you to think long and hard about it. Why the hell is there so much suffering in the world if God's doing his job? I mean, look at me. Take old Toomey, too. We done anything that bad to deserve all this put on us? She sighed. Because of people, that's why. Not God. It's people who allow suffering, people who create it, perpetuate it. Maybe that explains Hitler and all them others, but I'm talking about, he gestured at the room, the hospital in general. Clarice tried to see what he saw when he looked at the room. At one time, the white and pale green walls of the hospital rooms had given her solace. The way everything was clean, clean, clean. The many patients had been in each room, some nice, some dying, some willing to accept the Lord, but most, like Mr. Toomey, cast the Lord aside like wilted lettuce. And now the clean hospital room was just a reminder of the emptiness, the barrenness of her patients' souls. Cleophas Sanders was just another patient who disrespected the Lord. Why does he allow natural disasters? Why does he allow natural disasters to kill people? Clarice said, knowing that her voice was raised louder than what she meant it to be. Why are little children born to get some rare blood disease and die? Why, she yelled, waving her arms, does a crane fall on your leg and smash it? I don't know, Mr. Sanders, and I don't like it, but I'll say this. No one has a right to live. The only right we have is to die. That's it. If you get plucked out of the universe and given a chance to become a life, that's more than not having become anything at all. And for that, Mr. Sanders, you should be grateful. She had not known where this last bit had come from, and she could tell neither had he. But she could hear the other nurses coming down the hall to see who was yelling. And though Cleophas Sanders looked to have more pity on his face than true belief, he had come to her when, after she turned to leave, she'd heard the clatter of him gathering his crutches, and even when she heard the meaty weight of him slam onto the floor, she did not turn back. Then there it was. Pastor Everett's silly motion of cupping his hand to his ear like he was eavesdropping on the choir, his signal that he was waiting for Sister Clarice to sing her solo, waiting to hear the voice that would send the congregation shouting, "Thank you, Jesus, blessed Savior." How could she do it? She thought of Cleophas on the floor and felt ashamed. She hadn't seen him since her yelling had been brought to the attention of the administrators, and although the hospital was understaffed, the administration had suggested she not return until next week. They handed her the card of the staff psychiatrist. She had not told anyone at church what had happened, not even her Aunt Alma. She didn't want to sing, didn't feel like it, but she thought, I will freely sacrifice myself unto thee. I will praise thy name, O Lord, for it is good. Usually thinking of a scripture would give her strength, but this time it just made her realize how much strength she was always needing. She didn't want to, but she'd do it. She'd sing a stupid solo part. The waterfall, they called it. Not even something she'd invented or planned to do when, who knows how many years ago, when she had began to sneeze her brains out. But oh, did I turn the page right? Yeah, okay. She didn't want to, but she'd do it. She'd sting a stupid solo part, the waterfall they called it, not even something she'd invented or planned to do who knows how many years ago when she had to sneeze her brains out. But oh no, she tried holding it in. And when she tried to sing her solo those years ago, her near sneeze made her words come tumbling out in a series of staccato notes that were almost fluid. And ever since then, she had to sing all her solos that way. It was expected of her. Everyone loved it. It was her trademark. She sang, all of the ground is sinking sand. The congregation applauded. Saints, Pastor said, winding down, you know this world will soon be over. Jesus will come back to this tired, sorry earth in a moment, in a twinkling of an eye. So you can't call waiting on the Lord. Jesus, my friends, does not accept conference calls. You are the children of God. You need to pray. Put down your phone. Say goodbye to AT&T. You cannot go in God's direction without a little genuflection. The congregation went wild, clapping and banging tambourines whirling in the aisles. But the choir remained standing in case Pastor Everett wanted another song. For the first time, Clarice found that her monthly troubles had settled down, and now that she had the wherewithal to concentrate, she couldn't. Her cross eyes wouldn't keep steady. They roamed like the wheels of a defective shopping cart, and from one roving eye she saw her Aunt Alma, waving her arms as though listening to leftover strains of Clarice's solo. What would she do? She didn't know if she'd still have her job when she went back on Monday, didn't know what the staff psychiatrist would pry out of her. More important, she didn't know what her Aunt Alma would do without the special medical referrals Clarice could get her. What was a sister to do? Clarice's gaze must have found him just a moment after everyone else's had. A stranger at the far end of the aisle, standing directly opposite Pastor Everett, as though about to engage him in a duel. There was Cleophas Sanders with his crutches, the right leg of his pinstriped pants hollow, wagging after him. Over his shoulder was a strap, attached to which was his guitar. Even Deacon McCready was looking. What in heaven's name was Cleophas doing here? To bring his soul to salvation? To ridicule her for some other argument? Perhaps the doctors had told him he did not need the operation after all, and Cleophas was keeping his end of the deal with God, but he didn't seem like the type to keep promises. She saw his eyes search the congregation, and when he saw her, they locked eyes as if he had come to claim her. He did not come to get saved, didn't care about his soul in that way. All he cared about was, now she knew why he'd come. He'd come for her. He'd come despite what she told him, despite his disbelief. Anyhow, she disapproved. It was God he needed, not her. Nevertheless, she remained standing for a few moments, even after the rest of the choir had already seated themselves, waving their cardboard fans to cool their sweaty faces. And thus endeth the story. I'm chuckling because I'm just now getting an opportunity to see the comments, and the one that just caught me was this here. Erica Yolita saying, godly talent, don't let the devil win. You fight through that choking. Glory! I was expecting somebody to say, help him, Lord. Let him use you. That's all right. That's all right. You know, if somebody's singing the solo and you get that, that's all right. Go on now. You're not doing a good job. You're not doing a good job. Some of the lines that hit, and I know a few people saw this one, no one has a right to live. No one has a right to live. Yo, that is rough. But it's a lot to think about. It's a lot to think about. Erica Goodman says, Sister Clarice saddens me in that she does what so many churched folk do. I see what you did there. Plugging her show, Growing Up Churched. I see it. She does what so many churched folk do, use evangelism as a means of racking up points, judging people by how easy or how hard they are to convert. Man, yeah, that's real. Y'all gonna get another look. This is a regional thing. Some of y'all say pecan, some of y'all say pecan, some of y'all say pecan. I don't particularly care when I'm reading, whichever one comes out is what y'all gonna get. Y'all gonna take this literary pie, whatever fucking flavor it is, and move on. I saw you, and who else was it? It had to have been Angel Monique. Who else said it? We'll put that on the screen and lambast you too. Yeah, pecan. Y'all say what y'all say when y'all read the story on y'all show. When I read the story live and cold on my show, I say whatever comes out. Amen. 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 I wish I had myself a praying congregation. Anyhow, that was Every Tongue Shall Confess by ZZ Packer. Yo, let me go ahead and say right now, I enjoyed the story. It was one of those stories that just kind of went where it went. It didn't leave me with a lot, but it did paint some really rich character portraits, which I enjoyed. I enjoyed that it was not particularly white centering. You know, there was one white side character, which was to be expected, but this was a fairly blackety black experience, which, not to put too fine a point on it, but on this show, that's really what I like to present. So I prefer when stories meet out that way. I like to read black stories for black people, written by black people. Now, I will read to anybody who wants to listen, but the purpose of this show is to create a safe space for black literature and black thought. Sometimes that's going to come out in different ways. Not all black literature is necessarily going to be our kind of literature. You know, whoever is reading, it's not always going to be something that I like, but sometimes it's necessary to broaden those experiences and let people tell the story that they intend to tell. And I think that's why, despite some hesitation, I'm not going to lie, you know, I'm familiar with I get viewer mail, I get comments, I read all the comments. um I'm reading the comments right now where Latricia is fanning of her Klimt angel Monique over this whole pecan situation, and that's going to be all right. Everybody's going to do just fine. Get yourself a glass of wine if you need to relax. You can find some really good wine at EnglishBrownWinery.com, and if you use the code STWJ, you'll save 10%. You see how I did that? You like how I plugged that in there? I mean it when I say I want to support my sister's businesses. That's for real. That's for real. And my brothers too. So, brethren, if you've got something that you're doing, you've got a business that you that is about its business, go ahead and let me know about it. And if it's something that I dig and I can personally get behind, I got no qualms about shouting you out, for real. And that's everybody. Anyhow, that being said, we're going to go into our next story soon. But before we do that, if you enjoyed that story, and I hope you did, you can purchase the book "Drinking Coffee Elsewhere" with by ZZ Packer, which this is, I think, the third story in that book. But you can purchase that book on Marcus Books. Now, Marcus Books is an LA bookstore, and it's a black-owned LA bookstore. This was recently brought to my attention, and I've got a couple of books coming from there. I'm really, really excited to support them. You know that we always like to support local bookstores. We always like to support black bookstores. And so trying to pull some of this money out of Jeff Bezos's pocket and put it back into the hands of the black people who are out there doing the work and creating the opportunities. All right. I know y'all hear me on that. So go ahead and check out Drinking Coffee Elsewhere, and you can order it at bookshop.org/shop/Marcus Books. And just do a little bit of a Google on that. Now, Angel Monique seems to have trouble with the glass and this glass that I'm drinking from. Yeah, because my stemless wine glass broke. You got a problem with that? You want to buy me a wine glass? By all means, send it. But yes, my stemless wine glass broke. But was I not going to drink? Absolutely not. Do I care that you're judging me? Hold up. Mm. This wine says I do not care. This wine says I could care less. It really it it doesn't care. It doesn't care, and now I don't either. Anyhow, so that's that. The next story that we're going to read tonight is by Walter Mosley, again in honor of his birthday. This is ZZ Packer's birthday. This is Walter Mosley's birthday. Um, this story is a little bit shorter than the one that we just read, and it is an excerpt. It is an excerpt from Walter Mosley's 1995 novel, R.L.'s Dream. Now, R.L.'s Dream came out with I do. I am really trying to figure out what Tony means right here. I don't know what that means, but okay. Anyhow, Ariel's Dream was the first book to come out after Walter Mosley's Easy Rawlings series, and so it was a departure. Now, Ariel's Dream is about a Delta blues musician who is literally dying on the streets of New York. He has been evicted from his home, and he is sitting in soiled clothes in an easy chair in front of an apartment in Greenwich Village. And as is the case in many of Mr. Mosley's stories, a young white woman comes to his rescue. Yada 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 yada. That's that's the premise of the story. We're just going to read a short little bit of this. I glanced through and the skimming process, and some of the language caught my eye because whatever I might feel about Mr. Mosley's tendency towards white saviorhood, which at this point I think, for as much as he is beloved and as great a writer as he very clearly is, that is a running theme that does not speak to me personally. It's not something that I can really get with. So, however I might feel about that, I can take absolutely nothing away from his beautiful gifts of description. And so, I'm going to read this with the intention of featuring some of those lovely turns of phrase. Um, I think that's sort of the gift of being able to do this show, is having the opportunity to wrap my mouth around some of these more beautiful words and push them out in a way that I like to believe gives them the life that they deserve. They live a certain life on the page, but I think that some of the ways that these writers write are musical and poetic and deserve to be afforded the gift of speech and breath. So we're gonna look for those and we're gonna push those out. Y'all with me? Let's go. From RL's Dream. Hang on, I'm supposed to. This is where it would be so dope to have like an intern or something. Here we go. From RL's Dream. Inez used to kiss him at night when she thought he was asleep. She'd come to his corner of the big room after he'd been in bed for a while. First, she'd strike a match on a piece of sandpaper that was tacked up on the wall. Then she'd puff on the pipe in little gasps until Atwater could smell the sweet smoke of her cured tobacco. Inez came very close, but he kept his eyes shut, not even making a peep, because little boy is supposed to be asleep when it gets dark outside, and that's all there is to it. But he wasn't asleep. He was wide awake in his cot, fooling Inez, and that made him want to laugh and dance, but he couldn't make a sound while she was still there. Inez hovered over him. He could feel it like you could feel the harvest moon when it was over the frail sharecroppers' huts in the delta. And like that moon, she brought sweet smells and slight breezes that tickled his skin the way Kiki did over 60 years later up on the fourth floor. The child had ants in his hands and feet. He wanted to laugh out loud and caper and let Inez know that he was fooling her. He couldn't keep it in, but if he moved, Inez would get mad. Inez got mad when children couldn't control themselves. She wasn't like Ruby. Ruby was rounder and darker, and she smiled almost all the time. Inez was sweet smelling, but Ruby smelled like bread. Ruby didn't get mad, even when Atwater kicked over the bucket of cleaned and peeled turnips, or when he threw that rock that broke Ruby's grandmother's colored window, which Ruby's mother had given her from the deathbed. Ruby never got mad. She just let her eyes get real big and say, "Atwater, how did we let that happen?" And then they'd get together and work hard to clean up the mess before Inez could find out. But it was Inez who came out to check on Atwater at night after the alcohol lanterns were turned down. It was always Inez. And Atwater was always scared that he wouldn't be able to control himself and would make a peep, and then Inez would be mad and he'd have bad dreams. But just when he knew he had to let go, Inez would take a deep draw on her pipe and blow a sweet wave of smoke over him. The ants became long, dewy blades of cool grass between his fingers and toes. The moon gave way to blue sky, and Atwater was rising and falling like one of the great box kites that Fitzhugh made for the windy days of fall. Atwater Wise came out of the sky and hit the ground running, faster than the dive-bombing bumblebees, and with nobody to tell him when to come in. There was chest-high yellow grass to run through and 100 different odors of earth. There was the blood from his ankle once, from a sharp rock hidden in the moss of Millwater Pond. There were the hilly nests of fire ants that would swarm over grasshoppers and tired dragonflies. Cold water was good. Blood scabbing over and sluggish was good. Even the fire orange specks on the shiny green eye of the dragonfly were good. The wind through the stiff yellow grass wheezed like an old woman. Hidden in there were all kinds of birds that were named for their colors and sizes and personalities. They sang and warbled and croaked. Crows came from the devil, but they couldn't catch him. They called his name in crow words, but the little boy just laughed. His dreams were full of colors and smell and music. There, under the blanket of Inez's sweet smoke, he ran and played while she sat back, too old to have fun anymore. And then the kiss, warm and moist. It was only when she thought that he was asleep that Inez kissed Atwater. The loud groan of a timber and the snick of the door told the boys that Inez had gone back to the big bed with Ruby. He could open his eyes. But now he was too tired to move. The young boy fell asleep, but the old man came awake. Tears saved up from over half a century came for the death of that poor dragonfly. The red bird, the gray fat warbler, lost. Soup Spoon had tears over the great herons and the train that ran that night through the town, carrying big bales of cotton down the Mississippi River. He remembered the one-eyed cat that came to the window to look in the house, looking for Inez, praying mantis like death, searching for that one soul who slipped away behind some trees and was overlooked, half forgotten. Soup Spoon remembered days and days down by the river with his little boy friends, fishing, rafting, swimming among the catfish and carp. He remembered the cotton fields and all the men and women lumbering off to work from the plantation barracks. Hollers and calls came from the fields even before the sun was up, but it was silence he heard at the end of that day. "I'm way past tired to almost dead," Job Hawkfoot would say. But by midnight on Saturday, he was dancing full out. A Negro didn't own too much back then, but he had ears to hear music and hands and mouth to make it. Washboards, wash tubs, and homemade guitars, mouth harps from the dime store, and songs from deep down in the well. "No, Daddy," Kiki cried. Her voice was small and helpless. Soup Spoon wondered if it was a nightmare, if it was her nightmare that woke him. He sat up to look. The blankets were all kicked off her bed. Her naked behind was thrust up in the air because she was hunched over the pillow in some sheet. "No." A white woman's skinny butt stuck out at me like a peach ripe on a low branch. There was nobody left to tell. Nobody left to understand how strange it was, how scary it was. Nobody to laugh and ask, "And then what you did?" "And then I died," Soup Spoon said to himself. There was nobody there to hear him. And even if there was, so what? That was the blues. He was 11 years old the first time he heard the blues. That year was 1932. It was on a Saturday and Atwater had been hanging around at a barn party. He got to stay late because Inez forgot to send him home. It was Phil Wortham playing on a homemade 4-string guitar with Tiny Hill working a squeeze box. It wasn't like anything Atwater had ever heard. The music made him want to move. And the words were like the talk people talked every day. But he listened closer, and he heard things that he never heard before. Your heart breaking or your well running dry. Things like cake batter at the bottom of the bowl and the mist clinging to the road on summer mornings. The music made Atwater want to dance, so he knew that it had to be good. A good friend of the boys, an older man named Bannon, had been killed only a week earlier. Atwater hadn't shed a tear. People died in the Delta. They died all the time. Atwater hadn't cried, but a dark feeling came over him. He didn't know what it was until he heard Phil and Tiny play at the barn party. He didn't know that he had the blues. The music had changed him. From then on, at night, after Ruby and Inez had gone to bed, he'd go out the window and make it down to the Milky Way. The Milky Way was a beat up old chicken barn that had been coated with tar and dotted with yellow splotches of paint that were supposed to be stars. It was a lopsided, ugly building in the daylight. But at night, when you came through Captall Creek and around the old elm, it looked like something magic. Like, Atwater thought, a hill house of God. He was too young to go into a juke joint, but he made up his mind to try on his birthday. And so on a summer's evening when the sun was still out, Atwater told Ruby that he and Petey Sims were going to go set nets for crayfish down at the creek. But really, they meant to take the quarter that Fitzhugh had given Atwater for his birthday and get 2 glasses of whiskey from Oha, the midget owner of the Milky Way. Petey made it as far as the old elm, where he stopped and gawked as Atwater walked on ahead. "What wrong with you, Petey Sims?" Atwater asked when he turned to see that he was alone. Petey just shook his head. He was a long-necked, heavy-eyed youngster who everybody but Atwater called Turtle. Atwater followed Petey's gaze to 2 women who were standing out in front of the juke. They were big women, wearing loose dresses that flowed in the breezes, flaring up now and then to expose their legs. They had very big legs. Petey was looking at those women, especially, Atwater knew, at those legs, and shaking his head. Atwater was scared too, but he thought they'd be safe as long as they stuck together. "Come on," he said. "They ain't gonna bite you." He said it loudly to shame his friend, but he didn't expect the women to hear. "Hey, you!" one of them shouted. Petey took off like a scared hare. Shoot! He was gone. "Hey, boy!" the voice called out again. "You!" One of them was coming toward him. She had kind of a rolling motion in her thighs as she walked. She waved for him to come to her while her friend stayed back near the juke, shading her eyes to see. "Me? Come here!" the woman shouted none too kindly. She was tall and heavy-chested, with hair that was combed straight back from her head. "Come here!" Atwater's bare feet obeyed, but he didn't want to walk down there. "Hurry up, boy, I ain't got all night." The big woman was smiling, one meaty fist on her hip. "Yes, ma'am," Atwater said when he stood before the woman. "Elma," she said. Her smile revealed that one of her upper front teeth was gone. Another one had been broken in half. "Elma Ponce is my name. What's yours?" "Addie. Addie." Elma mocked the poor boy. "What you doing out here, Addie? Your mama know you here?" "Elma, what is you messing with this baby for?" The other woman had come up to them. They seemed like women then, but now, on Kiki's couch, Soup Spoon remembered them as teenagers, maybe 18, but they were women to Addie Wise. They wore the same cut of loose dress. Elma's dress was blue, while her friend's was a washed-out orange. "Just playing with him, Teresa." Elma took Atwater by the arm. "What you doing here, Addie?" The sweetness in her voice was not lost on him. "My birthday," he whispered. "What? Talk up." "My birthday today." Elma showed her snaggled teeth again. "Your birthday? And you come down the Milky Way to get a kiss?" No," Atwater said. He could feel himself shaking but couldn't stop. "You scaring the poor boy, Elma," Teresa laughed. "Let him be." "I come to get a drink on my birthday," Atwater said. He said it fast to keep Elma from getting mad. He didn't want to see her mad. "I come to get a drink with my birthday quarter." "You got a quarter?" Teresa asked. She was black-skinned and good-looking the way a handsome man looks good. "Uh-huh, yes, ma'am." Elma, still holding the boy by his arm, pulled Atwater toward the door of the Milky Way. "Come on," was all she said. The dark blue front door had a big drippy yellow circle painted in the middle. That circle was supposed to be the moon. Elma pushed the door open, dragging Addie in behind her. Teresa followed up the rear, holding on to his pants. Elma went up to the bar and shouted, "Oh, hi! Bring a pint bottle over here." She pointed across the dark room to a row of makeshift booths hammered together against the far wall. "The hell I will," small fat Oha replied. He climbed up on his stool to face her. "Where are you going to come up with money for a pint? Not 10 minutes ago you couldn't even buy no beer." Teresa pinched Addie's butt and giggled in his ear. He was thankful for her closeness because the Milky Way on the inside scared him to death. The floor was black and sticky, covered with crushed peanut shells. It smelt of sweat and sour beer. The ceiling was uneven and low. At some points, a full-grown man wouldn't have been able to stand up straight. And it was hot. I can't pay for it, Elma hooted. But my boyfriend here could. Elma yanked Daddy's arm, pulling him away from Teresa and up next to her. Well, pay the man, Addie, she said. You want your birthday toast, don't you? Atwater took the quarter from the pocket of his cut-off trousers and handed it to Elma. Not to me. Give it to the barman and tell him what you want. That's what you do when you a man. Oha had a mashed-in black face with a long cigar stuck out between his battered lips. He was too small to work in the cotton fields, so he had to go into business for himself. Well, the bartender asked. Addie pressed his quarter into the pudgy little hand. Yo aunties know you down here, boy? Oha asked once the coin was in his pocket. Yes, sir. You show? Oha had this thing he did with his eyes. He'd open one very wide and close the other until it was just a glistening slit. Put that eye back in your head, nigga, Elma warned. He done told you that they know, and he done gave you his money too. So pull down that pipe, that deep brown stuff too. After they collected their whiskey and tin cup, Elma pushed Addie until she had him dammed up between her and the wall in the booth. Teresa sat on the other side. She held his hand from across the table. After tasting the first drink, Elma leaned up against him, rubbing his chest and holding the cup to his lips. Drink, Addie. That's it. Take some more, baby. This here will make you into a man. His tongue and throat burned. The fumes from that homemade brew made his eyes tear and his breath come short. But what Addie felt most was Elba rubbing and pinching his chest. We gonna grow some hair right over here tonight, she whispered. Teresa's smile was bright against black skin. They all drank. Atwater held his breath as he watched the cup go from Teresa's lips to Alma's mouth and then back to him. Their hands were all over him, and they laughed more and more with the liquor. Elma was almost on top of him. She let her arm rest in his lap. I think Addie liked me, Teresa, she said. Teresa reached over and grabbed Atwater by the back of his neck. She pulled on him until they were kissing across the table. You better let up from him, bitch, Elma said in a serious tone. I'm the one who found him. He mine tonight. When they weren't fighting or feeling on Addie, the women talked trash. Addie learned that they lived on Peel Slope, a little shanty town where most Negroes slept under propped-up shelters with no walls or right outside on the ground if the weather was good. Elma stayed with her old uncle up there in a small cabin. Teresa had lived with them since her boyfriend had left her. Atwater wanted to know everything about these women. He could repeat every word of what they said, but he didn't understand it all. For years after that night, he'd remember things they said, and suddenly, because of something that would happen, he'd realize what they meant. As evening came on, people began to fill up the bar. It got noisier and smokier, but Atwater hardly noticed. Teresa and Elma were enough for him. When Elma would lean close, he'd look down between her breasts and she'd give him her shattered smile and say, Addie, what you looking at? How you girls doing? A slender man slid in on the bench next to Teresa, but he was looking Elma in the eye. Who you asking? Elma replied. She took Addie's hand and held it tight. You, baby. Who else I'm be talking to? All I know, nigga, is that you was supposed to be here 9 days ago. Nigga? The man had a baby face, but when he smiled, he looked evil. Elma's hand tightened under that smile, and Atwater's heart began to race. I don't know what you smiling at. Addie here took me out for a drink, so he my boyfriend tonight. Elma's voice had lost all of its play. The fine young face turned toward Addie. He smiled again without showing his teeth. Cody, Teresa asked, what you doing here? I said I was coming, he said. That was more than a week ago. I had something to do, woman. I got here as soon as I could. What you had to do? Elma asked. I don't see what it's to you. You done already got another boyfriend. Cody smiled and reached down beside him. He brought out of his overalls a full-quart bottle of store-bought Old Crow whiskey. I planned to say I was sorry with this here, but I guess I got to find me another girlfriend. You still with John, Teresa? The handsome black woman's mouth came open and she shook her head to say she was not. Teresa! Elma shouted. I ain't did nothing! Teresa screamed. She licked her lips and avoided Cody's smiling eyes. He just asked and I told him. You ain't gonna go messing around right under my nose, Elma said. She was crushing Atwater's hand. Come on, girls, Cody said. Don't let's fight. There's whiskey for all of us. Right, Addie? I I think I had enough, the boy answered. The room was hot, but his forehead felt like ice. I got to go home. Cody reached down to his pants again and came out with a long homemade knife. The blade was from 5-inch metal saw that had been shaped and sharpened by a grinding stone. It was black and jagged, but Atwater could see it was still sharp. The haft was wadded cork wound tightly with fly green fishing twine. Cody put the knife down next to the bottle and said, "You're not refusing my hospitality now, is you, man?" Cody, shut your mouth, Teresa. Ain't nobody asked you. If this man here is man enough to take my woman, then he man enough to drink with me. Elma sat stock still. She let go of Addie's hand. That was the scariest moment for Atwater, because he knew that if Elma was scared, then he didn't have a chance. I drink it, Addie said. While he was still smiling, Cody pulled the tin cup full to the brim and pushed it in front of Atwater. Cody, he can't drink all that. He ain't no man. Cody raised his hand and Teresa flinched back so hard that she banged her head against the wall. Atwater picked up the cup and started sipping. 50 and more years gone by, and he was still amazed that he had the strength to drink as much as he did. Cody put a finger to the boy's throat to make sure that he was swallowing. When Atwater finally put the cup down, Cody smiled and said, "That's only half." The room changed after Atwater drank. Most of what he heard was just noise, but he could hear some talk even from across the room very clearly. Colors became stronger and the yellow paint on the walls really did look to be the stars. Elma was saying something, but he couldn't make it out. I gotta go, Atwater said. See, Elma pointed at him. You done made the boy sick. She moved quickly to get up off the bench and let Atwater out. He slid over her with no problem, but standing up was a whole new experience. One leg gave way and then the other. He struck the table with his chin, but the feeling was more sweet than it was painful. He was afraid of falling to the sticky floor, but Cody caught him before he tumbled all the way. The evil baby face came up close to his and said, You go out and do your business, and then you come on back, you hear? The boy thought about nodding. Maybe he did. 'Cause if you ain't back in 2 minutes, I'ma come out there and cut you bad. Then Cody pushed Atwater toward the door. It was a crooked path to get there, bouncing off one body and then into somebody else. It was like playing a playful child's dance with everyone laughing and pushing. He didn't mind the horseplay, though, because even in that small room, he was too drunk to find the door by himself. There was the moon again, about 3/4 floating in the thick black eye. The night clouds were golden shoulders for that cyclops. The air was chill and for deep breathing, not like the hell smoke of the Milky Way. While Atwater relieved himself, he laughed because it felt so good. Then he started walking. The leaves crackled off the stream, sounded like baby bells. Every footfall was a bass drum going off. He was lost, but that didn't matter. He had a long talk with his murdered friend and said goodbye. He scraped and scuffed himself and finally fell face forward in the cold stream. The water sobered him for a minute, and he sat on a big rock and wondered where he was. Once he heard somebody call his name. At first he thought it was Inez out looking for him. He almost called out. Then he worried it might be Cody, so he kept quiet and played dead. The next morning he awoke in Alice Griggs' barn, just about a 1/4 mile from his house. A white hen was clucking and dancing around his feet. What you doing here, boy? When Atwater lifted his eyes to see the woman, he felt sharp pain throughout his head and jaw. Sorry, Miss Griggs, he said to the elderly white woman. I got drunk at the Milky Way and I landed here in your barn. That's the devil in you, Addie, the scrawny white woman warned. You know that, don't you? Yes, ma'am, he said, and meant it. He never did get a beating for that night. When Atwater came through the door, he was staggering from fever. The chill and the whiskey had made him sick. For 3 weeks, Ruby and Inez took turns sitting over him, covering his forehead with damp towels and feeding him foul home remedies one after the other. His lungs filled up and his dreams walked around the house with a life of their own. He choked and coughed and finally accepted that he was going to die. He made his goodbyes to Ruby and Inez so bravely that even stone-faced Inez cried. When Atwater got out of bed again, he knew that he was a man. Daddy? Kiki was sitting up in the bed. You okay? Soup Spoon asked. Fully naked, she got up from the bed and came over to the couch. She sat spread-legged before him and held out her hands for him to hold. It wasn't sex on her part. It was a frightened girl, no older than Addie at the Milky Way, holding her hands out to be saved. What's wrong? I don't know, I'm scared, she said all at once. I'm scared of what? Kiki told him her dreams of a stone boy walking her with his knife. It's okay, honey, Soup Spoon said when she was through. He ain't gonna get in here. That's not all, she said, avoiding his eyes. What else is it? I can't tell you yet. I have to wait. Okay, he said, trying to catch her eye without ogling her orange-brown crotch. I'll be here when you're ready. What's wrong? Kiki asked. Why you look away from me? I don't know. It's just that you're a nice girl. You should cover up in front of an old man like me. You shy? She smirked while trying to get him to meet her gaze. No, I ain't shy. I seen it all. But I feel like you and I feel like I don't want to get the wrong idea. Kiki's face went smooth when he said that. Her eyes became perfect circles with tears beaded up on the lashes. She leaned forward as if she meant to hug Soup Spoon, but then she got up and went to the bed and rummaged around on the floor. She came up with a ratty brown robe and wrapped herself in it. She held out her arms as she came back to the couch. Can I hug you, Mr. Wise? Sure. I won't let anything happen to you, she whispered into the embrace. Soup Spoon was thinking about little Addie, wandering through the wilderness over stones white as skulls. And thus endeth the story. So that was an excerpt from R.L.'s Dream. Again, R.L.'s Dream is about Soup Spoon, who is a Delta blues musician who, at the beginning of the story, is dying, literally, on a chair in Greenwich Village, and is taken in um, by a young woman who cares for him and shares her apartment with him. And I gotta say, I loved a lot of the description in that one. I think it had some really, really beautiful passages, um, very lyrical language. This is the kind of stuff where I absolutely get the love and the infatuation that people have with Walter Mosley. That kind of writing just doesn't just happen. Um, the overall arc of the story had a lot of concerning bits for me. It's interesting to me the things that, Walter Mosley is a man of a certain generation, and I think there are things that could be written about with a very easy pen because they were true to life experiences of those who grew up in that generation. And I think writing a novel in 1995, there were a lot of things that were easily written about that would not have really turned much of an eye. What we read ultimately in Atwater's story was a grotesque abuse, truly a frightening situation, and something that a young boy, you know, should not be involved in. And there's all sorts of arguments that are made about, it was a different time. It was a different time, but the women in that story knew that that boy was a boy, identified him as a boy, but used him like a man to make another man jealous, to secure alcohol for him, and ultimately to at least portend sexuality. There was a lot of, that inappropriate touching. Um, the brilliance of the writer notwithstanding, because I mean, you can see the scene, you can feel the heat, you can smell the environment. All of that is really palpable and really present, but it is all of these sort of fluffy, well, not fluffy, that's not fair. These very intricate, very beautiful words, very beautiful surrounding are gilding over what is still a foul, foul thing. um, there isn't really, I'm seeing a comment from Joker, and I'm going to go ahead and bring that up on the screen. Certain time is not an excuse. Men and women both knew better at that time, and they just chose not to do better. And that's exactly it. We can describe it beautifully, but ugly is still ugly. And I think that makes this one of the more conflicting pieces that I've read in recent history here. But that being said, Angel Monique points out that Mr. Mosley words create such beautiful imagery, and it's true. And this is the nature of this. This is why we run the disclaimer at the beginning of the show. We are writing and performing and exploring Black lit, and that means that we are going to come across a lot of things that are not necessarily great. Um, sometimes it's going to be that the work just doesn't speak to us, or we don't necessarily think that it speaks for us. And sometimes it's going to be that it speaks to some of the uglier parts of what may have been our past or even the present of our culture, and we deal with all of that, um, because art comes from all of that. um, we are pretty much at the end of our hour. I want to take, if you'll indulge me, I want to take a little bit more time. First, I do want to remind you, I this is not a plug. Let me go ahead and do this part though, because y'all ask about it. Y'all didn't get the satisfying glug because the bottle is it's a little lower for wear right now. This is not a plug. This is not a commercial. This is just legit enjoyment. I am truly enjoying Blackberry Delight, which is one of the beach wines from English Brown Winery. If you are a fan of Storytime with Julian and you would like to support this Black owned, Black woman business, English Brown Winery, you can go to EnglishBrownWinery.com, and using the code STWJ, you can save 10%. My pinky wanted to come out so bad, but I fought it. You can save 10% on your order. I don't know how long that code is going to be in effect, so I would encourage you to go now. I would encourage you to go tonight. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts about both of these pieces or either of these pieces. And while I wait for you to add your thoughts to the stream, I also want to encourage you, please, ma'am, please, sir, I need your support. Okay. Storytime with Julian is only here because of you, and it can only grow through you. I can make all the promos I want. I can run around and forge relationships and partnerships with other people. But what makes Storytime with Julian happen has always been you. It's always been you telling a friend, yo, there's this thing that I do on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and oh my gosh, you need to check it out. I love that. It is the lifeblood of this enterprise, of this effort. It is what, knowing that it speaks to you, knowing that it's something that you enjoy so much that you want to share with other people, really speaks to me. And it's what keeps me going. I recently had a little bit of a crisis of sorts. There was some screenshot floating around about an effort on Clubhouse that had gotten under my skin because it was a fairly new effort, and it appeared, based on how people were talking about it, it appeared that they were doing what I do. And and for a lot of reasons, the way it hit me last week, it just kind of, it was a gut punch. It was one of those like, oh man, I can't believe this, and how am I going to do this? And I had to really, I was given a couple of slaps upside the head by people who care about me. And I had to get present to a couple of things. First was, why do I even do this? Why do I do this? I'm not doing this for the money. I'm not doing this for the fame because I'm not famous and I'm not rich. I do this because I love words. And I do this because I love us. I love you out there right now, looking at me on your phone or on your tablet, or some of you even stream me to your television device, or maybe you're not looking at me at all. Maybe you're just listening to me in your headphones. I love you for coming out here. I love you almost as much as I love these words. And I love me some words. I love the way they feel. I love the way they sound. I love being able to move and manipulate them and give them shape and add meaning to them by just changing the emphasis, putting the emphasis on the wrong syllable just to make it sound a little bit different. I love the opportunity to embody these characters as an actor. I love being able to perform twice a week for an audience that actually gives a damn. That means the world to me. And so I do this because I can't not. I mean, there are people who love me who have to literally fight me to take a break. And when I take a break, it's hard for me. It is hard for me to say, okay, I got to take this week off. I do it. And then I fret about how am I going to come back and make the next one worthy of the fact that I took that time off. This is how much I love this thing. And I don't call on you to love it as much as I do, but I hope and I pray that if you do love this thing that I do, that you'll share that love with somebody else. Because them hearing it from me, they might see a promo that I make. They might see me share the post, but that's nothing compared to them hearing from you. Why do you give an hour, 2 hours, even half an hour to this thing that's not even a real show? This isn't even Netflix. Like, why do you do this week after week? If you tell people why and you make it real to you or real to them the way that I just made real to you why I do this, then they're going to want to come and check out what it is that you're doing with yourself every Tuesday and Thursday night. And it doesn't have to be every, but for those of you all who are faithful and do come every Tuesday and Thursday, bless you. I appreciate you so much. Now, if you're not following us on YouTube, you should. The YouTube experience is great. And when shows expire, like this one will in 1 week, you can still find the back episodes on YouTube. So do that thing. Make sure that that happens. So when people miss the live, you don't have to direct them to the Facebook page. You can just pull the YouTube link. You can share the page from YouTube. I'm okay with that. You can also find us on Twitch. We're streaming to Twitch right now. And I know that some of you have come and visited from Twitch, and I appreciate that. And I want to do more to engage our Twitch audience. It's just I don't understand to Twitchery that much. I am still learning. And of course, you can follow us on Instagram, and you can follow us on what's the other one? The Twitters. And on most of these platforms, we are either at Storytime Julian or we're Storytime with Julian. So just a search and we'll pop up, we'll show up. I am going to announce now for your hearing, so everybody can get ready. We will be doing an additional show. I'm adding an additional show to the weekly stream, but this one isn't going to be on our normal channels. Every Saturday, there will be a story time with Julian on Saturdays. And just to start it off, I'm going to kick off with a rereading of The Autopsy of Rare Sean Brown. Why? Because I'm introducing a new audience to who I am and to how Storytime works. So for those of you who love Storytime with Julian, you can find me on Clubhouse. I am at Storytime Julian, and you can sit in and listen. And for those of you who loved The Autopsy of Rare Sean Brown, there'll be another opportunity to hear that. We're going to do that as a serial every Saturday, Saturday evenings, probably at 9 o'clock. Saturday evenings at 9 for the next 6 weeks. We're going to do The Autopsy of Rare Sean Brown. And then after that, I will be selecting a novel and I'm going to read the novel. I'm going to break it down into weekly chunks and I'm going to read that novel and we're going to finish a book together. This is something that I had originally intended to do with the after story, but we're going to move that effort over onto Clubhouse. So if you want just another hit of how to find us, Boom. You can find us on Clubhouse. And it's not, I think we say here it's Storytime with Julian. It's not. It's at Storytime Julian. That's who you can find on Clubhouse. Judy Lee asks, is it starting this Saturday? Yup. Starting this Saturday. So if you're at the Clubhouse, go ahead, find me. Follow me. It's at Storytime Julian. You'll see my face. You recognize my face. And we'll go ahead and do that. Now, again, what I ask of you, thank you so much, Rena T. What I ask of you, please, ma'am, please, sir, everybody under the sound of my voice, if you love this effort, if you love what we do, please support. Support, because this right here, this is what I do now. Like, if I'm going to spend any money on myself, it's typically to grow this show. It is to make this effort continue. Um, this is what I'm giving shape to. This is what I'm breathing life to. This is what everything keeps coming back to and keeps pointing to. And I mean to do this. And I think it became real for me the first time that someone let me know that they started reading again because of this show. And then the first time somebody let me know that they started writing because of this show. And then the first time that I had the opportunity to present a work that did not exist in this universe until it was written by someone who had been inspired and moved to write because of this show. And if something like that can happen in the world, then who the hell am I to stop it? Like, I gotta do this. I love Black literature. I love Black stories. And if having the opportunity to hear it read, or having an environment where it can be presented and cared for and nurtured, gives somebody the courage to say, okay, I'm going to try and push this story out, then oh, hell yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm not going to stop. I don't care how many bearded brothers are out there reading or what they're reading. This is what I do. And if this thing that I do means something to you, then tell your friends and tell them why it matters, and encourage them to pop by. Encourage them to come by live, because it does my heart good to actually see those numbers tick up and know that you're there watching. But if they don't catch it live, let them know where they can download it, where they can peep it out when they do have free time. And as we grow and as we extend this effort and we do more things, I invite you to participate and be a part of that too, because this is something that you're a part of. This is something that you're a part of. I do this with you. We do this together. All right. Thank you so much for making Storytime with Julian what it is. Thank you so much for coming by tonight, for letting me read to you, for sharing your thoughts about this literature with me. Thank you so much for all of your support. If you want to support in a monetary fashion, you can. You can hit up Cash App, and it's $. Hold up. Boom. There it is. $Storytime Julian. You'll see the logo. You'll know that it's me. And keep watching for more great and good things coming from this space, coming from Storytime with Julian. Please, again, follow on all of these places. Um, I'm going to read a couple of these comments, and then we'll call it a night. Angel Monique says, you get so lost in the beauty that when he got to the abuse of Addie, it was jarring. That is true. Judy Lee said it's got a pretty color, and I'm guessing she's talking about that Blackberry Delight. It does, and it's so good. I'm embarrassed at how much I'm enjoying this. She also says that she loves the voices that I give them. Thank you. That is one of my favorite parts of this performance work. And coming from a background of being a voiceover actor, it's nice to get the opportunity to do this. Miss Ebony Martin is here with us. It's her first live, and she loved it. Thank you so much for coming on and joining us. And I hope that you come back again and again and again. And I hope that you tell a friend. I'm looking for some other comments here, making sure that I see them. Mosley definitely brought the environment and tension to life. He really, really did. Oh, and I don't think that I presented this one. You can purchase the book, the 1995 novel R.L.'s Dream by Walter Mosley, at Marcus's Books by visiting that link, which is bookshop.org/shop/Marcus Books. Marcus Books is a Black owned Bay Area bookstore. I think earlier I said Los Angeles, but I believe it's Bay Area. Look them up, look into their story. They do have an interesting story, and I think you'll all appreciate it. This has been yet another episode of Storytime with Julian. Thank you so much for coming out. I hope to see you again. This is Tuesday, so we'll be on again on Thursday, and I look forward to seeing you. Here come the credits, and What else? That's it, y'all. Peace.